The uneasy relationship between Major General Henry W. Halleck and General Ulysses S. Grant proved crucial in shaping Union strategy during the Civil War. Halleck, a West Point scholar nicknamed Old Brains, was an excellent administrator but a jealous and indecisive strategist. Grant, by contrast, was an aggressive field commander whose victories would eventually propel him above Halleck in the chain of command. As Halleck served as the Union's general-in-chief 1862 to 64, and Grant rose to prominence in the Western theater, their dynamic influenced how, and how quickly, the Union armies moved against the Confederacy. In fact, many pivotal campaigns in the West, from Fort Donelson to Vicksburg, were marked by tension between Halleck's cautious oversight and Grant's bold initiatives. Understanding their fraught partnership is key to understanding how Union war strategy evolved from hesitant and halting to relentless and coordinated, ultimately leading to Union victory. From the outset, General Halleck had misgivings about Grant. The two first interacted in late 1861 when Grant, then a relatively unknown brigadier, requested permission to attack Confederate forts in Tennessee. Halleck, commanding the Department of Missouri, was not impressed by Grant's unassuming appearance and informal demeanor, regarding him as an intellectual inferior unworthy of trust. During a face-to-face meeting to propose the Fort Henry offensive, Halleck, ill and irritable at the time, brusquely dismissed Grant's ideas. Grant left the encounter thinking he'd made a terrible mistake, and Halleck even weighed the idea of demoting him before any battle was fought. In Halleck's eyes, this rather ordinary-looking officer did not fit the image of a brilliant general. Halleck's low opinion began to morph into envy once Grant started winning victories. In February 1862, Grant captured Forts Henry and Donelson, twin successes that electrified the North. The triumph at Fort Donelson in particular made Grant a national hero after he demanded unconditional and immediate surrender from the Confederate garrison, a bold ultimatum widely celebrated in newspapers. Halleck, however, saw Grant's growing fame as an affront. He had himself helped strategize the move against Donelson and felt cheated of credit when the press lionized Grant as the victor. One observer noted that Halleck's attitude toward Grant seemed motivated by sheer jealousy at seeing his subordinate hailed as a conquering hero. Instead of praising Grant, Halleck grew more suspicious and began looking for ways to sideline him, even as Union forces pushed deeper into Tennessee. General Halleck's distrust soon escalated into active attempts to undermine Grant's command. In the weeks after Fort Donelson, Halleck seized on any pretext to criticize his subordinate. When Grant traveled to Nashville in March 1862, partly to confer with a fellow general, Halleck complained that Grant had gone absent without leave and was neglecting orders. He even dredged up an old rumor that Grant had resumed heavy drinking, insinuating that his former bad habits explained the supposed lapses. Halleck sent a flurry of messages to Washington accusing Grant of insubordination and pressed General-in-Chief George B. McClellan for permission to remove him. McClellan wired back his approval, effectively giving Halleck free rein to arrest Grant and replace him with a favorite subordinate, General C.F. Smith. Armed with Washington's consent, Halleck moved swiftly. In early March, he relieved Grant of field command, ordering him to turn over his troops to Gen. Smith, and reported that decision to the War Department. Halleck's zeal to oust Grant was based on little concrete evidence, aside from hearsay about drinking and some late paperwork, yet he proceeded as if Grant were derelict of duty. This maneuver revealed Halleck's willingness to sacrifice a victorious general's career over personal animosity and rumor. It was a drastic move. The hero of Fort Donelson now sat idle, effectively under house arrest, on a boat at Fort Henry, humiliated and uncertain of his future. Grant, devastated by the turn of events, repeatedly asked to be either fully exonerated or entirely relieved from Halleck's command so his name could be cleared. Halleck's gambit, however, backfired. President Abraham Lincoln and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton were surprised that the only Union general winning significant victories was being cashiered, and they quietly inquired into Halleck's accusations. The Army's Adjutant General, Lorenzo Thomas, demanded Halleck provide a full report justifying Grant's removal. Caught off guard, Old Brains Halleck could not substantiate his claims of insubordination or drunkenness. They had been exaggerations at best, if not outright fabrications. Realizing his position was untenable, Halleck swiftly reversed course. On March 15, 1862, he reported that Grant had left his command for Nashville out of mistaken zeal, but with good intentions, and that any irregularities in Grant's absence were unavoidable. Halleck admitted there never has been any want of military subordination on the part of General Grant, effectively withdrawing his charges. He recommended no further action be taken and ordered Grant back to duty. In a matter of days, Halleck went from denouncing Grant to rehabilitating him under pressure from the Lincoln administration. Grant was restored to command just in time to lead his army at the upcoming Battle of Shiloh. Remarkably, Grant would not learn the full story of how close Halleck came to ruining his career until decades after the war, when he read the official records. Grant's return to field command set the stage for one of the war's bloodiest battles, and for Halleck to interfere once again. In early April 1862, Grant's Army of the Tennessee, encamped at Pittsburgh Landing, was caught by surprise when Confederate forces under Albert S. Johnston attacked at dawn, igniting the Battle of Shiloh. The two-day carnage at Shiloh, April 6 to 7, resulted in a costly Union victory, but the sheer scale of casualties, over 23,000 killed or wounded, shocked the Northern public. Grant was fiercely criticized in the press for being unprepared and nearly defeated on the first day of battle. Sensing an opportunity, Halleck rushed from his St. Louis headquarters to take personal charge in the field. Halleck still distrusted Grant and perhaps doubted his competence after the surprise at Shiloh. Upon arrival, Halleck combined Grant's army with two others, those of Generals Don Carlos Buell and John Pope, to form an immense force over 100,000 strong. He pointedly kicked Grant upstairs to second in command, a role with no real authority. While Halleck assumed direct command of this grand army, Grant was left a general without a job, nominally high-ranking but with no duties, not even those of a staff officer. It was, in effect, another demotion, pushing Grant aside at the moment when his army was needed for the next campaign. Halleck then proceeded to conduct a painfully slow advance on the strategic rail junction of Corinth, Mississippi. Determined to avoid another Shiloh-style surprise, Halleck moved with extreme caution. Day after day, the massive Union host inched forward only a few thousand yards from Pittsburgh Landing toward Corinth, halting each afternoon to entrench their camps extensively. The march of roughly 20 miles consumed nearly a month. Halleck's deliberate approach did keep his army safe from counterattack. There were no more surprises, but it also forfeited any opportunity to destroy the retreating Confederate force. By the time Halleck's entrenchments finally crept up to Corinth's outskirts in late May, the Confederate Army of Mississippi, roughly half the size of Halleck's, simply slipped away. General PGT. Beauregard evacuated Corinth on May 29, 1862, leaving the city to be occupied without a fight. Halleck had captured his objective, but the enemy escaped intact, a fact not lost on critics who noted that a bolder commander might have trapped and crushed the Confederate army. For Grant, the Corinth campaign was the low point of his military career. Forced to watch helplessly as Halleck slowed the tempo to a crawl, Grant grew so frustrated that he considered resigning from the army altogether. With no command role and no input, he felt he was being set up to fade away. One night, during the siege, Grant was packing his bags to leave when his close friend, General William T. Sherman, walked in. Sherman urged Grant to stay and wait things out, reminding him that war has ups and downs and that fortunes could change. Grant heeded this advice and remained, though by the end of the campaign he was deeply discouraged. Ironically, Halleck's apparent sidelining of Grant would not last much longer. In July 1862, not long after the fall of Corinth, President Lincoln called Halleck to Washington and promoted him to General-in-Chief of all Union armies. Halleck's cautious Corinth victory, when contrasted with General McClellan's failure on the peninsula in the east, made Halleck look like a conquering hero in the eyes of Washington leaders. Believing Halleck's organizational talents could be used on a grand scale, Lincoln and Stanton brought him east. This move freed Grant from Halleck's immediate shadow. Grant retained command of the Army of the Tennessee, now spread out across western Tennessee and northern Mississippi to hold territory. After weathering Halleck's mistrust and micromanagement through the spring of 1862, Grant now had a chance to operate more independently, and the Union war effort in the West was about to take a new turn.